Welcome into Jake and Joshua, where we sound off on some of the hottest topics around Big Ten football. And listen, it is the midpoint of the season. It seems like a good time to run through some personnel and do a little Heisman watch. We'll make the case for some of the players that are currently in the hunt for that award. We'll start it off with probably the most obvious choice in the Big Ten, the guy who was a Heisman finalist a year ago, in C.J. Stroud. What do you make of his performance so far, and what do you think he has to do down the line to continue his Heisman hunt?
I think the numbers speak for themselves, but it's the context that's most impressive because, I was a big proponent of Jackson Smith-Njigba was probably going to be the Biletnikoff Award winner this year for the nation's top receiver. Well, you don't have him. Yeah. Travion Henderson was a preseason All-American at running back. Well, you don't have him. Those are your two best weapons coming into the season, and the offense hasn't missed a beat. So usually the Heisman Trophy goes to the best player on the best offense, and he's checking all those boxes.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. And just looking at his stats up to this point, 24 touchdowns against 3 interceptions, some really good numbers. But I think there's also a mentality shift for a guy like C.J. Stroud, where last year he was young and very unknown, and this year he's still young, but he's a known commodity. And everybody knows what his skill set is. So you have to evolve your game at that point and be prepared for people to challenge you where you maybe have weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And up to this point, he's handled all those challenges. So now I think in the second half of the season, he's going to get those bigger stages against Penn State, who we know might be a little bit down, but that is still a prominent brand in college football. He's going to have a great performance against them in a couple of weeks. And then, of course, at the end of the year in Columbus against Michigan, that would be a statement type of performance if he can go out there and have a 3-4 touchdown game like we've seen him do in many of these outings. I think that would cement his name firmly in the Heisman conversation.
Iowa's defense as well. Like, that's a game Ohio State should win. They probably will win. I would expect them to go out and win. But that defense is opportunistic, and they're going to make you, if you give them opportunity to intercept the ball, they're going to come down with it. So I would agree. I would just like to see him challenge more, but that speaks to how good he's been as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's made it look really easy in all the competition that he's played. And again, it's going to ramp up for him in the second half of the year. So we'll be on the lookout for that. We'll take it to Ann Arbor. You're very familiar with the personnel up there, and Blake Corum has been a guy who he started off the year, I think, with expectations of can he handle the load of being the number one back at Michigan in this run-heavy offense, and he's more than done that. And we've seen him do it in multiple ways on short, gritty, aggressive runs and on some home run hits as well, where the blocks have set up, and then he's a guy who can run away from the defense at the end of the runs. As I evaluate him, I think it's a combination of the finesse that he can bring, because his game is very nuanced. He's a guy who understands how blocking schemes are supposed to develop. He lets that happen exactly the way it's supposed to, and then he hits another gear. And that gear can be running through a dude's face, or that gear can be running away from a second-level defender. I think his game is very complete at this point. And in the second half of the season now, again, it's about stages, but for him, handling the volume that will be coming down the line.
And it's good to have Donovan Edwards healthy and helping him out. We saw how big of a piece he was in the Penn State game. For me, about what it is about Blake is it's his short area quickness.
Yep.
When he gets into this box and he's surrounded by his own offensive linemen and then the defenders, not only the vision to see where he needs to go with it, but the ability to burst and change direction without losing speed is what takes a 5-6 yard run and turns it into a 15-yard and so on, potentially an explosive touchdown. There's the politics of the Heisman as well. It's a quarterback-driven award at this point. Outside of quarterbacks, though, it's only been Alabama skill positions that have won it. Mark Ingram, Derrick Henry, and Devontae Smith. So we can go back to Mark Ingram and Derrick Henry, and we can look at their stats the year they won the Heisman at this point in the season and compare it to Blake Corum. He's having the exact same season, and in some areas even a better season than they are. So you look at the Heisman moment, C.J. Stroud, Blake Corum late in the season, that'll be both their biggest moments of the season for them to prove that they deserve to have the award.
Yeah, and I want to touch back on one thing that you said about Blake Corum's agility, the ability for him to stop on a dime and then hit full speed again. It is the play against Indiana where he was bottled up by 4 defenders.
That's the one that came to my head.
And he split them and just ran away from everybody. That is the essence of what Blake Corum can give you. You can have 4 guys in perfect position to make a play, and it doesn't matter because that guy is going to be the X factor that separates it. But there is one other guy who we really need to give some time to, and he is on a team that wasn't going to be notable at the beginning of the year or we thought, and a place that hasn't really had that national prominence to be in the conversation. But Chase Brown, the running back at Illinois, leading the nation in rushing yards. He is a high-volume back. We see him get physical with people, but we also see him explode in the open field. He caught some balls in the game that you called, and it was a similar thing that I saw in week 0 when I called the game against Wyoming. This guy is putting people on notice nationally.
Yeah, I the past 2 weeks I had a chance to watch him up close. And you look at a team and you say, why are they exceeding expectations? Why is Illinois in this position? Why are we starting to have this conversation heat up? And the biggest part of that really is Chase Brown. And he's doing it with such volume, but really isn't batting an eye. I think he had like 42, 43 carries last week, 45 touches when you include his catches in the game. And he just continues to do it every single week. And you mentioned it. What's so impressive about him is he doesn't get bored with these 5 or 6 yards runs throughout the game. He's perfectly happy with it. It's patient, it's patient, it's patient. And then all of a sudden, when the opportunity presents itself, he has that extra gear to then get to the second level, make a guy miss, and take it for a long carry. So he's just been phenomenal. And as you look at Illinois, how were they able to get to this place where we're starting to have a serious conversation with them in the Big Ten West? You have to look at Chase Brown.
Yeah, and I mean, you talked about vision with Blake Corum. I think Chase Brown's got really good vision too, because he knows exactly where to make the cuts in that zone scheme to be able to hit that seam where it hits big. I think 2 things for him down the line to stay in this conversation, and I mentioned volume before, but I mean, this guy has more carries than anybody in the conference by, I think, about 45 right now. So for him, his health and his ability to withstand a pounding. But number 2, you look at the touchdown numbers for him, and they're not overly impressive. Can he finish off some of these big runs now in the end zone? I think that would certainly help his case on a national stage.
And for Illinois as a team as a whole, right, is these past 2 weeks, they've just kicked too many field goals when they've had the opportunity to score. So it would help his Heisman case to get into the end zone a little bit more. It'd help his team as a whole. Like if you want to go to Indianapolis and be competitive in that game, you got to score touchdowns, not field goals.
Now, 2 guys I want to make sure that, or I'll give 3 guys to mention here that would be in the conversation, but there are some other factors that are limiting them, is Mo Ibrahim and what he's done coming back. And he missed a game, but against Illinois in the game that you called, I think his average was 8.5 a carry. That's a ridiculous number. And then the 2 running backs at Ohio State. And when you have a 2-headed monster like that, you're just not going to get the volume to achieve the numbers. But those guys have the most yards after contact in college football right now. So for other running backs to look at in this conference, because it's loaded with them, that are nationally prominent to me, I think you need to look at those other 3 guys.
You look at Mo Ibrahim, and what's so impressive is, you know, the pass game's been really ineffective in recent games. So teams are going to overload the box, and it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
That dude will run straight down your throat. It's so violent the way he.
It's violent is the perfect word, man. It's like, I mean, it's like a wrecking ball running right at you. Like
it's like a sickness. It goes against human nature to say
you're not
seek
supposed
out
to
contact
do that.
like that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And then the Buckeye backs, listen, you guys are having a great season, but you're getting the guy that's handing you the ball, handing the ball off to you is having a
so many
Heisman
ways
type
that
season.
you got to cut the pie in Columbus. There's so many guys that need to touch the ball on a game-to-game basis that if it's not the quarterback, and it's not going to be a Jackson Smith and Jigba type of guy who is supposed to be your number 1, I think it'd be hard for any of those guys to really accumulate the stats that are necessary. To flip it to a different topic, it is National Tight End Week. My guy Jake Butt, All-American tight end, Mackey Award winner. You epitomize what it means to be a tight end. Not just from the play that you had on the field, but from the mentality that you bring in here to the studio. You give us some nice ancient parables to chew on, make us really think deeply. You also battle through. When you're not feeling great, first year in media can be tough, but you said, I'm going to take this head on. So I'm going to give you the floor. What tight ends in this league right now embody Jake Butt, National Tight End Week?
It's a tight race beyond me as a player. It's a tight race, and I've had a chance to see Sam Laporta at Iowa. I mean, listen, and Luke Lachey's another guy,
but it's Lachey and Laporta.
Exactly. Yeah. So That offense has been less than,
Stellar.
it hasn't met the standard this year. But if there has been a bright spot, it's been Laporta. I imagine they go to him more and more and more down the stretch. So his stats should inflate throughout the season. You look at Michigan and what Luke Schoonmaker's done, just quietly putting out a great year. I feel like he's like the most underrated.
Supposed to be the guy there too. I was very high on him, and he's been banged up. But Schoonmaker, my gosh,
he might be the most underrated player in the entire conference.
He could be.
He's so nasty in the run game that never gets the credit it deserves. But when his number has been called in the pass game, he's been extremely effective. Watch the way he runs routes; it's phenomenal. I would look at Minnesota as well with Chris Ottman-Bell going down. Give the ball to Brevin Spanford.
All right.
He's 6'7", 270. He's like an NBA player out there.
That's one of the guys that I am really enamored with in this conference because he has extremely good movement skill at 6'7". I truly, if I were Minnesota, every pass play, I would think, is there a concept where we can isolate this man to just try to get him targets? Because as big as he is, it's a mismatch. 100%. Run away from linebackers, but he can moss safeties all day long.
When their offensive coordinator is Kirk Ciarrocca. When Ciarrocca was offensive coordinator at Penn State, he had a guy by the name of Pat Freiermuth, who's the current Steelers tight end.
Very good.
Freiermuth had his career high in targets, receptions, and yards under Ciarrocca. So I know there's a willingness to give the ball to the tight end. But what balance is great with a heavy running attack? We just talked about Mo Ibrahim. It's play action to the tight end, so I'd look at him too. Got to give a shout out to the Payne train over there at Purdue. He's made some big plays down the stretch. And then you mentioned a guy on Big Ten Today the other day. I'll give you the floor, Corey Dyches.
Corey Dyches, man. This was a Maryland offense that we thought was going to be defined by their wide receiver group. Many people at the beginning of the year said, and I believe this to be true, that this wide receiver group could compete with any of the best in the country, including Ohio State. And the players that they have in that room, absolutely. But who's the guy who's the biggest receiving threat on that offense right now? The tight end, Corey Dyches. This dude has been phenomenal all year long, and he deserves a lot of credit in this conversation of great Big Ten tight ends this year.
He leads the conference in yards by a tight end right now, so he's putting it on the stat sheet too. Got to give a shout out to Strange there at Penn State. He's having a good year.
Really good.
We're gonna leave somebody out, right? Because there's so many
Stover
guys. I was gonna say Stover. I mean, gosh, man, what he's doing. And another guy that just blocks well, and it's so hard for a tight end to perform at Ohio State because of the weapons outside. But when his number's been called, it's been phenomenal. So this is a tight race. I don't know who the midseason Big Ten tight end of the year is, but I think we did a good job of hitting most of these guys.
Man, I'll tell you what. I know you're excited. I'm excited too because as a linebacker, I like some rock'em sock'em going on. But we've got some versatile tight ends here who will hem a guy up in run blocking. But when it comes to the pass game, these guys are weapons as well. It's been a lot of fun to watch them have some success.
No doubt, no doubt.
All right, and that'll do it for us. Jake and Joshua, stay tuned.